Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Player, and I'm a professor at the University of San Diego. And I'm here with my colleagues, Bob Seibel, Michael Norwood. We're each going to introduce ourselves in just one moment. And our purpose here today is to talk to you about a class that we co-taught from our 3 different schools as an experiment in distance learning. First, a quick word about myself. I am a 21-year veteran at the University of San Diego, where I have been teaching in the clinic mostly for those many years. And my teaching includes both hands-on clinic plus stand-up classes plus simulation classes. And my interest in computers is really, has been very much a casual one, but one that's been very interesting to me. And so we began doing this largely because we had very similar interests and experience in terms of our teaching and our computer. So our computer experience. So let me introduce my 2 colleagues and then get started.
I'm Bob Seibel. I teach at CUNY Law School in the clinic there now. I too have been teaching for more than 20 years, including a long stint at Cornell Law School and shorter stints at the University of Maine, Drake, and Chicago-Kent. Chicago-Kent was my first teaching job, and I had the pleasure of working with Ron Stout and Jim Sproul on what was then called the ABF processor, a preliminary version of a document assembly system. And that's really what caught my interest in using technology and using computers in law practice and law teaching. And I've been dabbling ever since and hope to continue to dabble. My clinic teaching experience encompasses all kinds of clinical experiences in a variety of subject matters. I teach in an elder law clinic now. For a long time, I've taught a judicial externship course, and last year I taught that course as primarily an online course. The class only met about 4 times during the semester. That was my first time teaching the course that way. That was my first time doing a sort of an online distance learning course. And then last semester, I taught, in addition, the computer applications in law course with Mike and Terry.
My name is Mike Norwood. I've also long in the tooth. I won't tell you how long in terms of teaching. In terms of computing, I remember dreaming about building a robot in the garage of my home where I grew up in Los Alamos. Never succeeded. Still haven't succeeded. But in terms of real computing with law, I started in 1984 with a sabbatical in which I told the dean to justify the sabbatical that it would be a good idea to do something in the clinic with computers, and the dean said, "Great idea, why don't you go computerize the entire law school while you're at it?" And so since then, my interests are very similar to Terry and Bob in the sense that I have taught frequently in the clinic. That's my background. I also teach a course now in internet law, and I teach a clinic in child advocacy, and I teach pretrial practice, and I teach ethics currently. Those are my current topics. But Terry and Bob and I have known each other for a long time in this field of computers, and that's how we got together to dream up this course that we have put on.
Okay, now I'm going to give you an overview of the course, and I want to tell you that we have handouts for you. There's some here in a stack, and another stack over there. And these are just an outline of our syllabus, a course description, and then the first page you have is actually a more detailed description of the student projects that we used as a way of getting the students involved in the subject matter of the course. What we're going to talk about, as you can see from our PowerPoint slide that we put together at least 30 minutes ago, it's making noises at me. We wanted to talk about our goals, both for ourselves in terms of our professional development as teachers. We wanted to talk about our goals for our students in terms of their own development, to talk about the structure and methodology of the course, how we put it together and the choices that we made, and then to talk about specific technologies that we used in putting together the course. And then we will go on to have some interaction with you in terms of looking at the course as a model for other teaching experiences. One other thing I wanted to say is that the idea for this course came up while we were collaborating on something entirely different, which was a virtual clinic type of thing. The virtual clinic has been on hold for a while, but the class has been a lot of fun. So, let's move on to the structure of the course. Mike's going to talk about that for a moment.
Basically, the structure of the course was a 3-credit semester-long course, which we met weekly for a 2-hour session and then had a contact hour beyond that, so that's how we justified the 3 credits. The contact hour was for work outside of class, which was mostly computer laboratory, hands-on kind of work. There were 2 sessions in which we worked together collaboratively in a video conference session, so all 3 classes from all 3 schools were at their own site, in one in New York, one in San Diego, one in New Mexico, but that we were in a video conference session collaboratively for at least those 2 sessions. We also had at each site an additional session in which the 3 of us appeared real-time together, not in cyberspace, with each of our classes. So we had that experience as well, and the students could see us in the flesh and work with us in the flesh. The lab exercises, as I mentioned, were mostly outside of class, so we reviewed them in class, and we'll describe those to you in a little more detail. We did work off a common syllabus, common website. The syllabus we've handed out is one that is the most detailed one. Each site developed their own idiosyncrasies, and San Diego was the one that we thought would be worthy of handing out. This is the common website, homepage, computer applications in law. It breaks down into activities, weeks 1 through 6, resources, about is our syllabus and some other things, and the students could come here. Now that one you clicked, go to week 1. Week 1.
Sounds so easy.
Perfect. Yeah, that's just a quick example of what you could find. And then the resources were connected to the student assignments, so they could get an assignment and then link to the resources to get some help in achieving that assignment. Under About is where you're going to get the course description, syllabus, and the course staff. Under Communications, of course, we had lots of ways of communicating, and we'll talk in more detail about that. But simple course website. It was basically homegrown, developed at New Mexico with the help of the computer staff there. And there's a little JavaScript that was up there that enabled the faculty to insert whatever information they needed to insert fairly straightforward and simple. And that's basic overview of the structure of the course.
One of the things that I wanted to add to that, I don't know if you can see it up there, but what we incorporated into the class was a skills assessment form, which is the bottom part of this drop-down box, and asked each of the students to go fill out the skills assessment form and then submit it over the web. And that way we had some idea of what the students' experience and skill level was with various types of technologies, which enabled us to be more specific with each one of them. Okay. In terms of the professional development that each of us was looking for, and as I talk about this now, I realize that in some sense it's forward-looking, in some sense it's backward-looking. Because obviously part of what we wanted to do was to share our ideas and our experiences and so forth. Well, we had already spent quite a bit of time sharing ideas in some other contexts. This was something where we actually could work together on a class. But as part of that, and perhaps more importantly, was the ability to have the synergy of three people working together who don't get to work together often because, of course, we're geographically separated, but to have the ideas, the concepts, the disagreements, and so forth that come up. And we found that to be, I think, the best part of the course by far for each of us, not just in terms of professional development, but just in terms of the positive experience of teaching. We also learned about the technology that's available for the practice of law by using it in our teaching. And that's an interesting experience. Some of you were sitting here a couple of minutes ago and found that the link on our last site didn't work until the tech people came and finished it just now. Well, that's something that you learn about very quickly when you begin to rely on technology, is that it will always break when you need it most. And so you have to have a secondary plan. But it did expose us in a very practical way to a lot of the technological tools we wanted the students to learn about. And, of course, most importantly, because we went to each other's classes and actually sat in on them and discussed each class in a very collaborative way, we learned a lot about our own teaching styles. And because each of us did at least one class twice, once at our home school and then once at another school during the same week. It was very interesting to watch another teacher teaching the same material to another set of students. I learned quite a bit by that experience.
Okay. On the learn about teaching with technology by doing it, that's was for me one of the great, I guess, personal growth things, and I've challenged myself that way a lot over the years. But it's something that you, as a teacher, you have to be open to being a little bit vulnerable in front of your students. That you have to be open to the idea that you can fail in front of your students to achieve something that you want to do. An example of that was I gave a very simple, I thought, assignment of let's use digital signatures and encryption and talk about the technology behind that, how that works, and give an assignment to do that. Well, it turned out that it took me 4 weeks to set it up sufficiently for the purpose of the students to actually achieve my goals and for me to achieve my goals, working together with the students to get there from here. And I did it with some help actually from some of the students in the class. So you have to be somewhat open to the idea that you will work with students collaboratively and be a little bit vulnerable with the students in terms of your own technological skills. You cannot, none of us, I think, are perfect enough at this field of cutting-edge technology to be able to do everything skillfully in front of the students all the time. So if you set that up at the beginning and warn the students, hey, this is what's you're going to see, we're going to work on this together, we're going to learn together, we're going to get somewhere. But along those same personal growth lines, and Terry mentioned this with the skills assessment piece, the students walk in the door everywhere from the .com ready to sit down and go with technology anywhere it leads them to where's the on and off button. And given the range of skills, and I exaggerated a little bit, it wasn't quite that big a range, but it's a big range. And it's something that you have to work with, challenge in a very individualized way with each student. And so that may well limit the class size. Structurally, there were 14 New Mexico students.
I had 8.
I had 10. It also helps a little bit because you only embarrass yourself in front of a small group instead of a large group when things go wrong. We did also consciously choose to include some technology in every class meeting. So every time the class met, the students came and they saw us incorporating technology in some way. Often it was just a PowerPoint. Often it was just a trip to the web to search for some websites or to use some websites that we had found. I wanted to do a little streaming video, but we weren't equipped to do streaming video, so I linked up to the video camera on the pandas in the Washington National Zoo, and then just demonstrated how you could have off-site video projected into a courtroom or a classroom, just to demonstrate this. So in every class, we tried to use technology, not just talk about it, and sometimes it was great, and sometimes it was a little difficult.
I wanted to point out one other thing before we move on to the pedagogical goals. Mike sort of touched on it, but this is one area where in many cases you're going to have students who know a lot more about the subject matter than you do. That's usually not going to happen in torts or contracts or whatever, but they know about the technology, but not necessarily the application of it to law. And so it's very interesting from that perspective.
And that really is a good segue into our goals for the course. We sort of separated our goals into some knowledge-based goals and some skills application goals. And one of the things we wanted to do was start really nuts and bolts with what the basic technological tools are and how they work. So we actually did spend a little bit of time on how hardware and software works, and some of the students, this was completely new to. Other students helped us teach because they were very knowledgeable about hardware and basic hardware and software. A very important adjunct to that, if you will, was to get the students to start thinking about the impact of technology on lawyering. And from the beginning, we raised the question of what is it that lawyers do that can be replaced by technology, that can be assisted by the use of technology, or that can't be? What are the things that lawyers do that they're always going to have to do personally and face-to-face with a client, or personally in their office without using technology? It's surprising how much technology impacts on almost everything that we as lawyers do. But we wanted to get the students to start with the basic tools and then start thinking about how those tools impact on day-to-day law practice. We also wanted them to begin to think, and you'll see this was very much a survey course, we wanted them to think about some of the legal issues, substantive legal issues, that are raised by the use of technology. Copyright issues, privacy issues, and those kinds of issues, conflicts of law, ethical issues. And again, we didn't go into it very deeply, but we didn't want them to be thinking about using technology without also thinking about the substantive legal issues that the use would raise. We were very also oriented towards the impact of the internet on not just the practice of law, but the acquisition and management of knowledge. So the internet and the presence of the internet and the uses, abuses, and adequacies and inadequacies of the internet was a constant theme in our course. And some of the students, as you can guess, knew the internet and knew their way around the internet better than I did. But some of them were in the course specifically because they recognized the need to learn about the internet and technology, but were afraid to do it on their own. On the skills side,
Bob, let me add a point on the knowledge, just in terms, and it segues a little bit to the later slide on methodology, but while we're on knowledge, one of the, many of the areas we tried to teach came more alive, I think, because of the way that it was being presented. For example, jurisdictional issues were right in front of the students because we had California, New Mexico, and New York all applying different laws in different circumstances, and the students were able to see, oh, there's a real law out there in New Mexico that's not the same as the law here in New York, and which law applies under which circumstance. When they developed a web page, they were required to develop a privacy policy for their web page, to think about the privacy policies and how they work. So there were some ways we could take legal principles and translate them into some realities that they were facing in their daily laboratory work, which was quite exciting for me, I think.
On the skill dimension of our pedagogical goals, we wanted to not just talk about the tools, but to use them. So we had students doing projects using word processing, using spreadsheets, designing designing web pages, and thinking about outfitting a law office. We wanted them to think not just about the tools, but about the basic lawyering competencies, and again, how the tools would impact. We wanted them to think about whether you can be a competent legal writer in the year 2001 or 2005 without knowing how to use hypertext links. We wanted them to think about presentations in court and presentations to clients. Can you explain the law effectively? Will it be a basic lawyering competency to use PowerPoint, to use graphs and visual presentations when you're counseling a client, certainly when you're making a presentation in court, maybe even in negotiations. So we wanted them to think about the applications and how they were going to play out and affect their day-to-day practice using the basic lawyering competencies. We wanted them to think about developing judgment of sort of a cost-benefit analysis on the use of these tools. Sometimes the tool could be used, but better judgment would be not to use it for one reason or another in terms of its effectiveness in a particular situation. So some of it was about thinking about judgment, thinking about choices. And then, as I say, we very much wanted them to develop a mindset of experimenting with technology, picking themselves up after a failure and moving to the next step, and transferring what they learned using one technological tool to how they thought about using a different technological tool. And I think that one of the fundamental problems that lawyers have and law teachers have about developing comfort and a willingness to try new technology is fear of failure and frustration about it. And once you sort of solve a couple of problems, then it becomes a lot easier and a lot less formidable. And we wanted the students to get that experience, partly because the students told us, at least a lot of my students told me, that that's what they wanted. They wanted to come in and try things, have somebody there to help them out when they needed it, but to get some actual working experience.
Just to add a little bit to the skill dimension piece, and then we'll move on to the next slide. This was a very challenging thing to think about. How do I teach this diverse group of students in terms of where they came into the class, the skills that I want to teach them? How do I move them from where they are to someplace else more advanced than where they walked into the class in the beginning? And I think, at least in New Mexico, I started with some assumptions that may not have been very good assumptions. They were, I think, in some past iterations of this course that weren't this team-taught system that I taught in New Mexico. And that was, I started with some basic fundamentals of computing. Things like bits and bytes and files and folders and directories and subdirectories and how to tell the difference in extensions and BIOS and packets being sent through the internet, and the 7 layers of these packets. Throughout the course, I covered some of this information. And that may not have been necessary. I'm not sure about it. I've had different feedback on it, but from my experience and how I learned, I thought it would be useful to look under the hood and see a little bit more about how computers work in order for them to develop their own skills and their own ability to articulate what was going on with the computers. I believe, at least in terms of the internet piece, that it's very important for the students, in order to understand the law relating to the internet, to understand a little bit about exactly how the internet functions, how it actually works, so that they can understand how email gets transmitted from one person to another person, and what the steps are to get there. And so we spent some time on that, and that was sort of a knowledge, as well as my goal there was to, I thought if they knew that, they'd be more skilled. So I don't know if I spent too much time on that. I now have a feeling that maybe I did. But I just wanted to let you know that that was one approach that, at least in New Mexico, I took to some of the skill dimension.
I just want to add one thing to that, which is that what I found is that the students' knowledge was spotty. There were some things they knew a lot about, and other things, surprisingly, they didn't know very much about. And I'm not sure how to correct that, except maybe to have a set of readings that really do cover the basics, and maybe have them do some other form of skills assessment. But for example, in order to understand the privacy concerns, you need to understand how the transfer packets and so forth work on the internet, right, and understand what the vulnerabilities are. And that, I think, was one of the things that's worth thinking about.
On the specific legal uses of technology, we bulleted some of the things that we tried to cover in a survey kind of way. We did spend some time on legal and factual research, but connected that to some of the, in fact, had a problem that was related to internet use of the internet, the legal issues raised by that, and they were required to go out and research that. But we did some factual research things there too, how to use the internet to find out information about other people or other things. And they were required to do a problem after that particular class. Case and matter management, we spent a little bit of time on that in class, about what the various packages are, how databases work, dreaming up, if you're running a law office, what do you want to keep track of, how do you want to keep track of it, and questions of, do you want to develop your own database in-house, use something like Outlook versus buy an off-the-shelf program, cost effectiveness, all those things comes into play when you're talking about case and matter management and how that plays out in terms of ethics as well as other important matters. Litigation support, preparation for trial, that brings in some fun things, some of which we went kind of far out with, expert systems, artificial intelligence. You can go that direction, but there's some really pretty good software in other directions there too. I connect timekeeping billing to that, basically the management piece. Presentation skills, there was a lot of work on that in a number of ways in terms of how technology can be used to enhance or detract from the skill of persuasion, of advocacy. And so we spent a lot of time, actually, both hands-on and in the classroom theoretically with some of the presentation.
Mike, one of the things that I did with my class was I actually found a website for a company that does computer simulations for lawyers doing trial work. And their online demonstration of what they could do was totally persuasive. And so I played it in class. And you saw this demonstration live, on the web, and you wanted to hire these people. I mean, you were sold not only on the persuasive power of simulations in the courtroom, but on how good these people were at creating them. So that was...
it was very powerful. It's very powerful to watch somebody get decapitated in an accident. It's very persuasive that you feel some sympathy for that person. There's no question about that. Was that one of the...
No, it was an airline crash. there was no blood and gore. But
it was Albuquerque. It was one of the sites I went to. It was fun. The last piece, communication, may be the whole theme of the class. And the whole thing, if you had one umbrella thing to look at, it was about collaboration and communication using technological tools, mostly the internet. And the class was really built around that. And we defined communication very broadly, but we worked with, and we defined a web site itself as a means of communication. But there are other more interactive technologies, synchronous, asynchronous communication technologies that we introduced the students to, and we were required to use them. So the communication piece may have been the overriding theme throughout the course of the legal uses of technology, and including our sessions that we had with the video conferencing. We had 2 video conferencing sessions, and of course everybody in the room, including the faculty, were pretty gaga about, wow, look what this is, but also somewhat reflective about what are the limitations of this. And it led to interesting discussions about the use of video conferencing by lawyers in terms of arraigning criminal defendants, in terms of negotiating globally, in terms of presentations at hearings from a number of different perspectives, in terms of taking depositions. All those kinds of things were covered in that piece of the communication.
I also like to think about the communication piece as bridging the 21st century lawyer with the 20th century lawyer, the technology with this traditional lawyering skills. Because part of the analysis, whether you're doing a PowerPoint presentation, creating a website, or whatever you're thinking about in terms of using technology, you still have to think about who's your target audience, what is it you're trying to accomplish, what's the audience going to hear, and how are they going to process the information, and how can you best communicate with them? And if you, those are sort of the traditional things of thinking like a lawyer, in addition to legal analysis, that we've always talked about. And using the technology in some ways was just not a ploy, but a tool to make students think, or to help students think about some very traditional things in new ways. And again, that was sort of a meta theme for the course, was to think about what's really new. And I use Napster as an example for that. 5 years ago, Napster was almost inconceivable. The technology was sort of there, but what they did with Napster was almost inconceivable. And so that's like totally new. And then, staying with the music theme, I used John Coltrane and Bob Dylan. I mean, Bob Dylan took folk songs, by definition, had been around for hundreds of years. And he took us to a whole new place, using traditional tools, if you will. And so we, again, talked about new tools and new uses of old tools.
And before you move to the next subject matter, in the communication field, one of the issues that we talked about that has a lot to do with this particular subject matter is the use of communication technology to do e-filing for lawyers and clients and so forth, and realize that there are a lot of issues involved, such as the privacy issues for people, for example, in bankruptcy cases, which has taken on e-filing with great gusto. Suddenly, all this information is not only available to anybody who goes and looks at the court file, but anybody who knows a little bit about web technology and how to get through. Now, are there ways to deal with that? Probably, and of course we talked about those, but it was one way of thinking about why technology has a specific impact on some of the things that were pretty mundane before.
Let's move to student projects. One of the assignments, as I mentioned earlier, was just a straightforward internet research assignment, but in terms of giving these assignments, we tried to use the technology at all times. So the assignment was presented to them in terms of a technological internet legal problem that they got off the web. They read it on the web. They selected one of about 8 or 10 sub-projects within that were generated by the hypothetical that they read. They were then required to develop a memo in response to it, which was required to include a lot of linking to resources where they found the answers to the internet problem, as well as an analytical statement about how these links informed the answer to the problem. And then they were required to submit that to the faculty by means of attachment and email. So that was the way that particular assignment played out. Part of that assignment did include factual. They were required to do a factual investigation as a legal investigation using internet tools, and they were not allowed to use Lexis or Westlaw in the research. They were required to use some other type of research because we felt that the Lexis Westlaw had been covered sufficiently in other areas of the curriculum. The dynamic linking assignment was simply to demonstrate to the students that different computer applications could be linked to each other, specifically a spreadsheet and a word processing application. We used a little simple billing problem. We taught them a little bit about spreadsheet that way so that they, if they had never used a spreadsheet before, they got to use one. If they'd used one before, they were required to develop one. And for my students, I challenged them a little and pushed the envelope as much as I could for those that were experienced, and they linked that spreadsheet assignment to an actual letter to a client with a bill, and demonstrated how they could change the hours or the hourly rate, and it would change the amount in the letter, that sort of thing. So some of them had never seen that before. Big deal. They loved it, but it was an opportunity really to focus on word processing and spreadsheets as a foundational applications for a lot of the other applications that are out there in law, and get them to imaginatively think how they can be applied to all kinds of practice situations. The PowerPoint presentation, all of these assignments, by the way, the three of us got together and we worked together on what elements of each assignment was important to include. It wasn't just do a PowerPoint. It was do a PowerPoint, and your PowerPoint must include these elements. And some of the elements are silly, but we wanted them to know that they were there and that they could be used, and then we could talk about how to selectively do them. Elements like link out to a website from your PowerPoint. Include sound files in your PowerPoint. Include transitions in your PowerPoint. So we had a series of elements that must be included in each assignment. And the goal there, of course, was to get them to include them in an intelligent way that made sense. And some were successful and some were not successful at that. They were all successful at including the elements. Whether they made sense where they put the element was another question. That PowerPoint presentation, it turns out, was something that they used, we did not require, but they used extensively in the last point up here, which was inter-school collaborative class presentation. We thought that it was very important, since we were doing this collaboratively, to introduce the students to using internet tools for the purpose of collaboration. And so we gave them an assignment. At each site, a team of people, an assignment to jointly prepare a class presentation on one of the topics we were covering. And teamed them up early in the semester and said, now get together. We gave them each a distribution list that they could use. We chose, as faculty, not to be part of the distribution list so that the students could feel like they were able to converse with each other with some privacy, that is, they didn't have the faculty lurking over their conversation. Turns out that there's so much going on. Even if we wanted to, we probably wouldn't have had time to lurk. But we set that tool up for them. We introduced them to the net meeting tool and encouraged them to actually do face-to-face communication in order to prepare this presentation. And all of the students in my group, and I suspect in most groups, ended up doing a presentation using PowerPoint anyway. Now, sometimes the presentation was, in fact, I don't think there was a single instance where the PowerPoint presentation presented independently at each site was the same. At each site, they did share some slides. They picked and choose the slides that they thought would be most effective at their site, selected their sites, and then did their presentation. But there was some collaborative enterprise going on in order to prepare the slides, in order to research the materials and bring it together in the classroom. Those collaborations were varied. That is, how much collaboration went on and were they successful.
The New York students sort of lost a little bit of interest when they found out that they weren't going to get to go to San Diego and New
Yeah, the actual real-time visit was not part of the collaboration. They all did hope for that, though. And I will say that there was a range. Some were very, very involved, very detailed, a lot of interactivity, and some were less so. And we've thought about ways to encourage that more, to bring that into the classroom more, and to do a better record keeping of it, and maybe get them more involved in the collaboration. But that was certainly, at the outset of our course, a major goal. And there were some big hurdles there. These students at all of these sites had never met each other. And to this day, and the only way they met each other was at the video conference for the first time, and they would see each other on the screen and learn their names and say, "Oh, you're so-and-so, glad to meet you," because they were actually face-to-face actually seeing each other. That it's all been text before then.
Yeah, we didn't video conference until about halfway through the semester. So they had already been communicating by email.
So that piece was kind of fun, and we've thought about some ways in which to encourage the collaboration, because that was a major goal, again, fitting under the umbrella of communication. Internet tools as communication.
Well, we should admit, sitting here in this lovely facility, that we did these two video conference classes. None of our three law schools had a room that was equipped to do it. We each had to go out in our universities and borrow a distance learning classroom from the medical school, the business school, and in my case, the undergraduate school. We hope that by next year at this time, all of our law schools will in fact be equipped, not as lavishly as Suffolk perhaps, but at least we'll be able to do it from our home base.
The next project, sort of skipped ahead, but the next project I haven't covered, which was also a major project, and I think from the students' perspective, one that they really focused on and put a lot of energy into, which is the law firm website. And they were required to do this non-collaboratively, which may have been a mistake, I don't know, because it sort of undercuts our theme. But we wanted them all to have the skill base and the knowledge base in order to develop a website. So they were all required to develop a website, and the website we assigned was, imagine yourself a member of a law firm, and we gave them some outlines of what the firm would include. And as a member of that law firm, you have been assigned the task of developing and publishing a website. So they're each required to publish a website. And they were given, again, just like the PowerPoint presentation, certain elements that must be included in the site. The site must be capable of doing certain things. Some of the things were a navigation bar, and they had to write one and develop it or find one. Some graphics, some linking of different types of linking. We gave them some instructions on the different types of linking and how those linkings can take place. They had to include a privacy statement. They had to have some interactivity, that is an ability for the user to be able to communicate back to the website. They had to have a intellectual property statement or a copyright statement, and they had to have a disclaimer statement. That is, what is the purpose of this site? Can you rely on this site for the purpose of determining how you're going to proceed legally? In other words, are we going to be legally liable for the stuff we put up on this site? So we had several elements that they were all required to work on, produce something a little different. Now, we gave them some opportunities to be a little bit creative and come to us if they wanted to deviate not from the elements that were required to be included, but from the nature of the site itself. So if they didn't like a 10-person intellectual property firm site, they could come to us and say, gee, I'm really more interested in doing something in the public interest area, although that was one of the options that we gave them at the outset. But they could actually come to us and say, I'm really now working on X project in the clinic, and I would really like to develop some web pages to support that project. We would say, well, can the web pages include all these elements? Yes, it can. Okay, we'll go with you on that. So there was some flexibility in that because some students wanted to use their time to develop something that could be used more than beyond this class they thought could be used for other useful purposes, and so we approved that on a case-by-case basis. You guys want to add anything to the website piece? The websites were all then published, and that turned out to be a little bit of a challenge depending on the site. They were not published. They were published at each site on their own server. That is, San Diego has its own server space for its students, New Mexico its own server space, and New York its own server space, and they did not cross. That's probably something in the future that ought to be addressed. So again, it supports the collaboration. They can look at each other's work, that sort of thing. And some of the students were more interested in having the publication more broadly than others. Some wanted it to be very private. It's for you and nobody else. And others were really proud of it, and they said, gee, will you promise to leave this up for the next 2 years so I can have my potential employers all go look at it and see what great work I can do. The other major assignment was to develop a law office technology plan. So they were instructed that by the end of the semester they would come to a class in which they would present a plan for implementing technology in a law firm, and we gave them parameters of the firm, which was a 10-lawyer, 7-staff firm, and we asked them to go out and develop the Cadillac model of technology and then the Ford model, and sort of look betwixt and between, and also cost it out, and to force them to think about not only the cost today, but how much is it going to cost to maintain this thing and to grow into the future. So it was an exercise in really forcing the students to get together, think about how to apply technology in a law firm situation. Those basically, I think, cover most of the major student projects. There were other student projects. There was a weekly, basically, student project that was done. These were the ones that constituted the major effort of the students.
Okay. As I said earlier, one of the elements that made this work, and that in retrospect was perhaps the most rewarding part of it, was the collaboration of the teachers. And at the outset, if when we're thinking about doing this, you really need to recognize that you've got to have some real basic agreements between the professors about what it is you want to cover, what your basic goals are, what methodology you want to use to get there, and so forth. But within that, need for agreement, there is also a great deal of flexibility. Once we had our basic plan for the course put together, we realized that in our own class, we had a lot of flexibility about how to cover certain subjects. I had at least one project that I know the other two didn't assign because I thought that was important, and so forth. So it's really kind of the best of both worlds, where you have this sort of larger structure of collaboration and agreement, and yet specific room for your own idiosyncratic ideas about teaching. One of the interesting challenges for us is, of course, once you get the agreement ahead of time and so forth, as the course goes along, you really need to have regular communication between the teachers, and trying to find ways to do that were not expensive and that allowed us to try to use some of the tools that we were encouraging our students to use, gave us some unexpected challenges. We used NetMeeting, which is a free product that you can get through Microsoft, but found out fairly soon that you can have a two-way webcam meeting, but not a three-way. And in fact, we weren't even able to get the audio to go three-way, if I remember.
Yeah, you can do three-way audio, but we couldn't do three-way video.
So then we used an email system. We used that quite a bit, and that was fairly common. I'm sure all of you do that a lot. We had our own tiny little distribution list. But what was probably the most useful, ultimately, was our weekly conference calls. So we got really low tech when it counted. The ability to talk and have somebody respond immediately turned out to be quite important in terms of trying to get across some of the ideas about teaching and so forth. So that was a real lesson for us to learn.
Did you speak weekly before each class or after each class?
It was kind of both.
It was both, really. We spoke on Monday, and class met on Wednesday, so we frequently would talk about what happened last week and what's going to happen next week, and what technological disasters we had and which ones we were expecting.
But and I think I've actually really covered this before, the class visitations to each other's class was really remarkably useful in giving you a sense of how other students look at the larger enterprise and how specific topics get treated and how other people teach them. And that was really very useful. And since we all also engaged in the teaching part of it, we were interacting with a whole different set of students. So that was really a very interesting part of the course. And I might suggest it to people as a way of expanding your own teaching opportunities.
Yeah, really, I think I feel a little bit like we've been trying to sell you snake oil or something, but it isn't a cure-all for everything, but we had such a wonderful experience, I think, doing this. And in terms of getting a diverse student audience, communicating with each other, geographically different, culturally different, just in every way, it really, I think, enhanced the experience both for the students and for the teachers. So we're very interested in thinking about this as a model, a collaborative model for teaching any kind of course. Imagine 3 torts teachers or 4 torts teachers who normally get together once every 2 years at an AALS conference and chat about pedagogical issues, to actually mount a unified website and then teach in coordination with I think it would just be, in that context, as rewarding for the teachers as ours was for us, but with a different set of challenges. Some of the tools that we use, like our listserv that worked okay with a combined group from 3 sites of less than 30 students would take on a whole different dimension if you had 3 groups of 100 tort students or contract students. I mean, you could still, and I would strongly urge people to use the listserv, but you might use it in different ways than we did. So part of what we wanted to wind up with was a little bit of discussion, questions, comments you may have about what we did, but also a little bit of discussion about possibilities and possible problems that you might see in adapting this approach, this collaborative team approach with a lot of independence built in, to other courses that you teach.
Has anybody tried something like this with somebody else? Where you're trying to teach the same course?
Well, you should. It's great. It's really good. There's a question up there.
Actually, I got 2 questions. Can you give an idea of what kind of hardware you were using? And the second part of that question is, have you thought about, or did you run into any problems with different platforms, like some school having Mac or
Funny you should mention Judy Law School is probably is certainly the only law school that has a virtually complete Macintosh environment. There are some other law schools that have mixed platforms, and of course you all know that probably 95% of law schools are pretty much PC oriented. So we did have some issues that came up with cross-platform questions, especially when I was trying to do some assignments using Word and Excel, and some of the students had Macs at home, and some of them had PCs at home, and they brought the disks in, and but those were not really that.
My related question is, did you incorporate that into the class?
Oh, yes. We incorporated, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when my students gave their presentation on outfitting the hardware and software for a law firm, one of the presenters was an avid Mac person, and the other was not particularly wedded to anything, but had chosen PCs. And so there was considerable discussion about the different platforms. And it was good in a way for me, from a pedagogical point of view, because you really can reinforce the notion that it's not about hardware, it's about functionality. It doesn't really matter whether you're using Macs or PCs, so long as you've got the hardware-software combination to do what you need to get done. And if you can get the students to focus on what's the end result that they want to have, again, that's a good problem-solving skill. It's a good lawyering skill. So we did. I don't know if you guys had cross-platform.
Yeah, they came up, but most importantly, that question raises for me is that we were able to demonstrate that the Internet is platform independent, and that the communications that are available there are not 100% platform independent, but they're largely platform independent. And I think that was an important thing to bring out.
Although within that, there are still some bizarre things. I mean, I went to a website that said, this website is only usable with Internet Explorer. And I had never seen that before. And I was in Netscape. And I'm looking at this website, and I'm saying, no, that's not right, because I'm there. Well, if I clicked on some of their links, I got kind of fuzzy images. So I said, all right, I'm going to go into Internet Explorer and try it. And it was a totally different experience. I mean, there was all kinds of content that wasn't showing up on Netscape. Well, that was a good lesson for me, because I had never seen that, but it was also a good lesson for the class to be thinking about. Again, you have to think about who's the end user, what are the tools that they're going to be using, who are you trying to reach, and how are you going to communicate? So let me also, go ahead.
Just from a student perspective, having watched this, and you do have a range of abilities whenever you start a class like this, did you sort of just throw them to the wolves, or did somebody provide support for their...
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, I'm glad you raised it because I was thinking I need to say something about the role of the IT personnel in this course as well. In partial answer to your question, some of the advanced students were very good about helping the less advanced students, and as always, you learn a lot by teaching somebody else, so I considered that a good piece of the course for the advanced students, as long as it didn't become too much of a burden for them. How can I say this? I think you can. There are very few things that I think you can say with certainty in the world. One of them relating to this course is that the more help and support you can get from the IT people at your school, the better off you will be. At my school, this semester that I taught this, I had minimal support from the IT staff. We had too few people, and they had too many other things going on, and they couldn't really support me. I think the course worked okay without a lot of support, but there wasn't a week that went by that I didn't think, boy, I would really like to get some of my tech support people involved. Not just because it would make the course easier for me, but because it's so important to get the perspective, the technical perspective, even the problem-solving techniques involved in the whole discussion. And I also think that the tech support staff people, at least at my school, are so busy with basic nuts and bolts things that they don't have enough time to think about the pedagogy and the academic, the delivery of stuff. And they are so hungry to do that it would have just been great for all of us if we could have had more collaboration that way. So I would definitely say that the more you can collaborate with the IT people at your school and get them involved in the course, the better the course will go, the better the experience will be for the students and for you. But that's not to say that you can't do, I think, a pretty good delivery of a course even with minimal support if you have to.
Bob, I was at the opposite end of the spectrum from Bob. I had terrific support from the people at New Mexico. And I don't say that just because we have our director of the computer here. But we had at least one session where it was totally given by the IT support people, and I wasn't even there, but they had a special session just on developing websites and web pages. Then, in addition to that, I tried to communicate as frequently as I could with the computer support people as where we were in the class and what to expect when these students come racing down to them and ask them questions about, gee, how do I do this? So I tried to warn them in advance that this was happening, not always enough warning because sometimes they would get busy and overwhelmed, but they were totally supportive, totally involved in the concept of the course and helpful in developing some of the course and what should we stress, what shouldn't we stress. So the more you can partnership, I think, the better. And I think in the future I could partner even more than we did for this course. But we've been doing it in New Mexico for about 4 years now, so we've started to develop enough of a background to be able to do this more and more effectively every year. But if you can at least find one person who's with you and who is capable of stepping in and saying, yes, I will help out. Even if it's just I'll be available when students are in the lab, they can come to me, I'll sit down with them and give them some one-on-one support. Very, very useful.
And we could not have video conference without the technical support of a university, not just law school, but university tech support people. They were outstanding at all three schools.
One other thought on that is that I had a research assistant who happened to be an expert in web design and had taught web building and so forth to students in another context. That was a big help because she actually had lab hours where the students could go and work with her. You had your hand up? I think we're past our time. Are we not supposed to stop at 5:30?
As long as people want to stay in.
Yeah, so
We'll stay if you want.
I have a quick question. Based on your experience, what else do you think would be useful from IT to help you to prepare students for real life? For instance, chatbot. For instance, test bed, or we use the word test bed, basically experimental testing, or use billing software so they will go out in real life and know how to use it. Maybe a little bit more of IT knowledge, so they will be able to troubleshoot the problems themselves. But if they go to the portal, they will laugh if something doesn't work, they get nervous, affects their performance, basically. What is your experience? What do you suggest? What do you recommend?
Just at the outset, I think if you partner with a member of the faculty, if you're from IT, and you should go to find a person on the faculty to talk to first about your own ideas, and hopefully the faculty member would listen and say, yeah, that's important. But in terms of one of the things that was a goal at New Mexico for many years is to improve the students' skills at their own problem solving with technology issues. And I think that the IT people can be tremendous at aiding their learning in that regard. But in terms of all the applications that we cover, and we're not selling any application, we're talking functionality. But in terms of applying, of helping the students learn and use those applications, IT is critical to that. It just can't be done, in my mind, without at least some consultation along those lines. We had a survey course. We tried to cover the waterfront. That may be too much. Maybe we try to do too much, and that might be something I'd back off on and rethink, because we covered an awful lot of territory, some of which was maybe one of those mile wide and inch deep kind of problems, and we may want to pick in the future to go a little deeper into, especially the web stuff.
How much time do students have to put in for this
It varied from student to student. Again, it was that range of students and where they came to the course from. I'd estimate probably 2 hours in class and probably about average 7 hours a week out of the class. Average. In some weeks we're heavy and others were lighter.
John?
Just a general question on the faculty and curriculum committee's reaction to the courses.
Right.
I mean, it seems like,
Right.
on the one hand, you might have the reaction that, 3 credits, do we really want to have 3 credits for this? Which I guess, from your goals, though, I think you addressed nicely by focusing on the ethics, professionalism,
Right.
skills, etc.
Right.
On the other hand, I could see where you might have folks saying, this is perfect skills-based stuff, we should have this for all the students. Why are we just limiting it to 6 or 10 students?
Right.
In fact, we could even use this as a CLE course
Right.
and make some money out of it.
Right.
What was the sort of reactions?
All of those things, yeah. What we did not get, at least I didn't in New Mexico, was any resistance. No resistance. No, gee, why are we doing this silly thing? Does this really belong in a law school? We got none of that. And I expected to get some snootiness. Is this really law? What does this have to do with what a law school mission is? I got none of that at my school. I got the opposite. How can we help you? How can we adapt this to other circumstances? A high interest in it, especially from the dean.
Did you do anything with court reporting?
Yeah, we did real-time transcription. We didn't do it, but we covered it. We covered it. We did. We also were lucky in New York that the legal tech show occurred during the time that the course was offered, and there were several vendors at the legal tech show that gave great demonstrations of the possibilities there, and we talked about that after the tech show.
I think there was a question back here. Maybe we ought to wrap up pretty soon.
Basically the same, a law faculty question. Do you only offer this to final year students?
I'm sorry?
Do you only offer it to final year students? What year?
Oh, I had both second and third year students.
Same, second, third year.
And do you fit it into a department, or is it standalone? Our courses are it's commercial law or criminal, or how do you fit it in?
We don't do that. Some schools have concentrations, but this really doesn't fit with any of our 3 schools, I think, with any of the concentrations that we have at our schools. So it's kind of a standalone thing. If it fits anywhere, it would fit in the intellectual property kind of area, where students in that area are highly keen on what's happening with internet law and computer law, if it were to fit anywhere. But I think it's more of a skills-based thing, though obviously we did weave in some law, so the law we did weave in probably fits best under the umbrella of computer law.
In response to both your questions, I taught the course as under the umbrella of a topics in law rubric, which is our catch-all that allows us to offer a wide variety of courses without having to go through the complete approval process, which at CUNY not only involves the law school faculty, but the board of trustees of the university. So we have this topics in law thing, and as a result, I didn't really get scrutinized by the faculty, and I didn't fit into any department.
Mine was in the same category in the sense that we can offer a course for 1 semester as an experimental course without having to go through the curriculum committee. If it were going to be offered on a regular basis, I suspect a lot more of those questions would be asked.
And I'm hoping to teach I'm going to be visiting at Cornell Law School next year, and I'm hoping to teach the course in the spring at Cornell Law School, and it will have to go past the curriculum committee, and it will be very interesting to see what kind of response I get.
Well, thank you all. One last question.
I came in late. What was the name of the ABA book mentioned here? The reading? It just says ABA Chapter 1.
It was
There's a book called The Complete Internet Lawyer, published by the ABA.
Right. We also drew heavily on Henry Parrott's book, Using Computers in the Practice of Law, but we didn't require purchase of it.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.